Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together we are the Bills Guys. You can find us on Twitter at the Bills Guys. And we are the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And we've already got people in the comment section letting us know what's up. We got John Herring saying, "What's up, peeps?" We got Chris Janke saying, "Yo, what's up, guys? I'm back from my hiatus." Richard Rush, always coming in super friendly, just asking the fam how it's going. We got a bunch of other people in here as well. Ronald R coming in saying good evening, y'all. So welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I got a fresh cut and I am ready to roll. Dave, how are we doing this evening?
I mean, taken aback by that hair, honestly. I'm struggling to focus because I just man, it looks good. And I have a feeling it'll be a good show tonight because of that.
My biggest issue is I like it when it goes in a certain direction, but because and it's in the direction I like it, but with the camera, it flips. So my hair is not actually flipped the way that you see on screen. It's flipped the other way, and I prefer it flipped the other way. So seeing it on screen and knowing everyone else sees me with my hair flipped this way is a little unnerving to me. But I do appreciate the compliments, everybody in the comment section. I'm a teacher. I'm on summer break. I got 2 months off. I had to kill the time somehow. So I just went and cut all of my hair off. And you know what? We're in the depths of the off season. The Bills start week 3 of OTAs this week. I'm sure some things happened today, but we have no idea what happened today because the media is only allowed in on Tuesday. So next week, we might have some more updates for you, as well as on social media. We'll have some updates for you as well on our Twitter, our TikTok, our Instagram. You can follow us, and all the handles are on the bottom of the screen there. And we'll give you updates on OTAs over the course of the week. But since we got nothing to talk about, it would make sense to jump right into our topic for this evening, which is our expectation for the Buffalo Bills defense. But I mentioned last week, it's like no one on social media has done anything stupid. No one's done anything stupid in a while. We don't have any jabronis of the week. Well, we've been blessed with 2 jabronis of the week this week. So we got to start things off with our 2 jabronis of the week.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away. And the Rock means 3 seconds away from the Rock to lay the smack down on your candy ass.
Yeah, I can't stop you though. You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
Well, we got to start off our jabroni of the week this week. And it's so sweet that we get to do this. Like, it really just feels good. And our first jabroni of the week is the New England Patriots organization, and more specifically, Bill Belichick. I don't know if you guys have seen the news that came out today, but there was just a beautiful tweet that came across my timeline from Dove Kleiman this morning. And the tweet read this: the Patriots offensive play caller this season is trending in Matt Patricia's direction, a source tells Jeff Howe. Patricia was recently fired after a failed stint as the Lions head coach, finishing with a record of 13-29. Belichick hasn't named an official offensive coordinator yet for 2022. The decision has been between Matt Patricia, a career defensive coordinator, and Joe Judge, mostly a career special teams coordinator. So, New England Patriots, this is news to my ear. Dave, what are your thoughts on this breaking Patriots news?
It's so weird. Like, was it former Bills coach Juan Castillo was like a defensive line coach, but then also like an offensive? Then they made him like an offensive coach in like another team. Like, I don't know. It's weird. Like when guys switch sides of the ball.
Offensive line coach to replace Sean McDermott as defensive coordinator.
Yeah, just very, very strange situation. And now we're talking about it at an even larger scale when you're talking about the actual coordinator of a team. Obviously, like you said, Patricia with the defensive background, and then having him then become the offensive coordinator just seems odd to me. And the fact that the Patriots are doing this, like you said, is it because Belichick doesn't want these guys to have to interview? Because if you actually have a name coordinator, you do have to do interviews. Like, it seems like a really roundabout way, or like a waste of time to just have a guy not have to interview. And Chris says here, didn't Joe Judge call a QB sneak? Yes. And we were actually,
Yeah.
you actually were just talking about that before we came on the air. It is very
Mhm.
odd, but it's also, I'm not losing any sleep over it because you know what? We've
Yep.
had the bad end of this rivalry for
Mhm.
20 years, basically. And now it's just funny to see the Patriots going through something like this. And there have been some questionable moves they've made in the
Yeah.
draft and other things. So it's like not everything Bill Belichick does is gold.
Mhm.
Like a lot of what he does is, I get that, but drafting these decisions, it's very weird to me. But it's also very entertaining to see this.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Jenke mentions sort of Joe Judge's claim to fame. It's third down. You're at your own goal line, and he calls that infamous QB sneak with Jake Fromm, and the fans just light him up with boos. And he essentially, I think, at that point got himself fired. But over 2 years, he completely deteriorated and like killed the culture and the vibe in New York, like with the Giants. The
Mhm.
players despised him. They hated playing for the man. He completely killed the culture of that organization. Then you had the Detroit Lions, who every year were winning like 8, 9, 10 games. They were a decent team under Jim Caldwell.
Yep.
Probably many people assume they underachieved. Matt Patricia comes there, tears it down, destroys the culture. Everybody hates him. And a team that had somewhat of a pulse completely became an organization like the Detroit Lions, who kind of like the Buffalo Bills, perennial cellar dweller, things can't get any worse. They got worse under
Yep.
Matt Patricia. So you have the choice between Matt Patricia, the man who destroyed the Detroit Lions, and Joe Judge, the man who destroyed the New York Giants. Neither guy having much of an offensive background. Yeah, that's really who you want calling plays for your second year quarterback. I mean, absolute jabronis there, and we're trying to figure out why. Is it Bill? But so Rooney Rule could be one thing, right? You have to adhere to the Rooney Rule. If you name an offensive coordinator, you got to interview, a person of color for the job, a minority candidate. Second is people with the title of offensive and defensive coordinators have to do weekly press conferences. Apparently, Bill Belichick doesn't want them doing weekly press conferences. I don't know if he thinks that is a tactical advantage or Bill Belichick just wants all of the attention on him and all of the credit to go to him. Who knows what exactly is going on there in New England and why it is they're doing what they're doing. But it's becoming crystal clear that that dynasty was built on the shoulders of Tom Brady and not on the shoulders of Bill Belichick. So that's always fun. I hope some New England fans are watching. We are enjoying your suffering. We are, in fact, enjoying your suffering. And speaking of suffering, your ears are about to suffer because we got not one, but two jabronis of the week this week. And our second jabroni of the week comes from the new quarterback of the Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson.
I'm Broncos country. Let's ride.
Broncos country, let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride.
Bills country, let's ride. So my second jabroni of the week goes to Russell Wilson for that absolutely forced and absolutely cringe like catchphrase moniker that he seems to be trying to patent there. I was a little worried about Denver. They're not in their schedule this year, but they got a very good team, right? Me and you were both worried about the Denver Broncos. I don't know how worried I am about the Denver Broncos anymore after seeing that.
They have a good roster. They have Russell Wilson. I mean, Nate Hackett's their coach. We obviously are very familiar with him. They're in a stacked division. So, look, they're just another good team in the AFC right now. We don't play them, like you mentioned, but if there was anything to give that team some bad omen or bad juju going into the season, that could be it, man.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, to be honest, look, I've watched Russell Wilson for a long time. He was obviously at NC State before he went to Wisconsin. Throughout his career, he's always been a little bit, I don't want to say awkward. It's not the right word, but I feel like he oversells or it almost feels like WWE a little bit when he does interviews and the way he talks in interviews and kind of it seems like he oversells a little bit and kind of goes too far on giving kind of like the canned answers, like the player speak type answers. So this just kind of fits in to what I've seen from him over the years. I think he's a great player, and I actually think he's a great guy, but like it does feel like in interviews and things like that, he does go a little bit it's a little cheesy to me for him. So this kind of fits right in with kind of how he's been.
Me and you were trying to brainstorm before the show. So my question to you is because you came up with one, and people in the comment section, let us know. Have the Bills ever done anything that cringe? like have the Bills ever done anything that cringeworthy that you look at and you're just like, oh, kind of
I
embarrassed a
mean,
little bit.
a little embarrassing. Like my first reaction was the QB1 tweets and social media posts when Nate Peterman was named the starter at the beginning of the season. Like,
Yes.
what was it, 2016? Or I can't remember. I think it was
2017
2017
or
and
2018, sorry.
2018, excuse me. QB1 Nate Peterman. And then like in the social media posts, it was like the highlights of him throwing like to Kelvin Benjamin in the preseason for like a touchdown for like 15 yards. It's like, it just felt way too forced and a little cringy to me. But at least it wasn't a Bills country, let's ride phrasing in there.
Yeah,
So
I
that
mean,
was pretty bad though.
it has to be organic too. Like it can't be forced. Like when Kyle Brandt says, Bills Mafia mount up, that comes from outside the organization. That's somebody else creating sort of a catchphrase or a movement. That makes sense. I literally was struggling to think of anything that cringe. Like, and this is a different era too. And the Buffalo Bills made the wise decision to keep said thing that they did, moniker that they had in the 80s or the 90s. I'm a little too young for this, but they used to have like these music videos where they talk about like, Buffalo, something like talking proud. Like they used to have this song or something like that, this catchphrase. At least they kept that shit in the 80s and the 90s where it was, where it was maybe a little bit more culturally relevant or acceptable. And it wasn't, you look back at it now, it's a little cringe, but back then it sort of made sense. So at least the Buffalo Bills weren't jabronis like Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos and decided to keep that moniker where it belongs. And Truth to Hearts comes in and says the most embarrassing thing was D-Cop catching a game winner or Allen's lateral. Hey, at least those things happened. At least those things happen in a game, right? So those are authentic things that happen during a game. So, all right, transitioning now to sort of the main topic of our show for this evening, we're going to be setting our expectations for the Buffalo Bills defensive unit. So if you were here with us last Monday or listened to us on demand, we set our expectations for the Buffalo Bills offense. What do we expect it to look like? Statistically, what are we expecting? Target share, roles for each players, etc. We went through and we did all that for the offense. So today we are going to do that for the Buffalo Bills defense. Let's start with just first of all the personnel, because the Buffalo Bills going through a little bit of an overhaul. I wouldn't call it a major facelift, but going through somewhat of an overhaul on defense this year. Possibly 3, maybe even 4 if Trey White doesn't start the season, new starters on defense in 2022. And you're seeing pretty much 7 new players are going to step into a role on this defensive unit, and they are going to be replacing 7 guys who are exiting. So 7 new guys in, 7 guys out. And position-wise, it sort of lines up too. So in, you have Von Miller and Shaq Lawson on the edge. Out, you have Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison on the edge.
Yep.
In, you have Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, and Jordan Phillips on the interior of the defensive line. Out, you have Vernon Butler, Star Lotulelei, and Justin Zimmer. In, you have Terrell Bernard as sort of the third linebacker, a guy who can play in the 43 when we go to base 43, a guy who can come in case of an injury. He replaces AJ Klein. And then last but not least, CB2 first round pick Kyer Elam is replacing Levi Wallace, who had been the starter there for multiple seasons. So for everyone out, somebody is in. Was this how you expected the offseason shakeup to look based on the way the Buffalo Bills played in 2021?
I expected there to be a shakeup. I didn't know obviously which players. I think we were all kind of under the impression that there would be a new CB2, or at least a good chance, right? There would be a new CB2 because Levi Wallace being a free agent, there was always that uncertainty that he be back. I do think the Bills had to address the defensive line, right? This was something that we knew was going to be happening. Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison were both free agents. We thought there was maybe a chance one or maybe even both of them could be back. But by the way, being spoke about like them at the end of the season, we got the kind of feeling that they probably wouldn't be back. So we did expect kind of a mini overhaul, if you will. And to be perfectly fair, the Bills have kind of sort of done this on the defensive line for 3 years in a row. So it's not a total surprise, constantly trying to tweak and figure out like what combinations work best. We know they deploy a heavy rotation, so they want to have a deep pool of guys on that defensive line. So it's not super surprising. Wasn't sure if they released Starr considering his contract, but kind of took that decision out of our hands by going ahead and just retiring. So it made things a little bit easier for the Bills there. But otherwise, no, nothing overly surprising to me about kind of how this was done. I think we both were supportive of the double dip at defensive tackle and free agency. So that was welcome. And otherwise, yes, CB2 was addressed. They did add that splashy pass rusher. Now, I will say this. The Von Miller signing did somewhat come out of nowhere, right? I mean, we know the Bills were on J.J. Watt last year, but after signing Daquan Jones and Tim Settle, like the Von Miller signing came after those. And so that was a surprise because we had figured, well, with the cap and that fact that, they had maybe gone like, okay, we're going to address the interior and we'll come back and maybe bring back a guy like Hughes at the end of free agency. And instead they went the complete other way and splashed for Von Miller. That was obviously the big surprise and a welcome surprise.
Yeah. I mean, to be quite honest with you, this was not the offseason I expected for the defense. I mean, it was a welcome unexpected. The unexpected moves were welcome, but based on the way they played in 2021, now regardless of the last 13 seconds of that game in Kansas City, my expectation was they'll go out and they'll probably try to upgrade CB2. They will, I thought they would run it back with Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison. I thought they would try to add some two gapping defensive tackles. I wasn't expecting a massive overhaul of 7 players. And I wasn't expecting the Buffalo Bills to go out and mortgage a good chunk of their future on a veteran aging named player like Von Miller. I'm happy they did. And the Buffalo Bills clearly said to themselves, we need to shake things up. We need to rock the boat a little bit. Being a good defense statistically isn't the only thing. We need to have some of those dudes who can step up and do things in the playoffs. Some of those guys who can make us more multiple so we don't have the Indianapolis Colts running all over us. So we could match up with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Turns out Tyreek Hill ends up and gets traded. But the Buffalo Bills went out and they said, listen, we got to diversify. We got to add more traits. We got to add some more big time playmakers to this defense. I was a little taken aback by it. I thought they would run most of the defense back, but I'm pleasantly surprised at the moves that they did make. So let's start to set the expectation for the players on this defense. And let's start like we did last week with a take. So taking a look at this defense as a whole, what is one take or one prediction that you feel confident making related to this defense? You look at this defense on paper, give me one take that you feel confident in based on looking at this defense.
Well, they were the number 1 defense in the league last year, so it's kind of hard to not have a ton of confidence in these guys. So I'll say this: one take I'm confident in for this year. The Bills were like 12th or 13th in rushing defense last year. They were outside the top 10. They allowed 109.8 yards per game. My take that I'm confident in this year is that the Bills will be a top 10 run defense. I do believe that. I think with the additions of Daquan Jones and Tim Settle, Ed Oliver coming into his own and becoming like a budding star. I know Jordan Phillips isn't the best run defender, but I like the mix of guys. I feel like there's a lot more energy. There's going to be a lot more energy with this group. Remains to be seen kind of what Boogie Basham's role will be, if he's going to help him kind of in that run defense. But Shaq Lawson, we know in his time here from years past, was a good run defender on the edge. So I feel like this Bills team this year will have a top 10 run defense. And as we start talking about the different position groups here, that's something that I do feel confident in. As much as we kind of, I don't know that we criticized the run defense last year. It was just inconsistent, right? We had some of those inconsistent games against New England and Tennessee. I think some of those inconsistencies narrow a bit. I think you'll see that run defense be a little bit more consistent this year, and that will put them in the top 10, which, by the way, they were really just outside. I think they were 12th or 13th last year. So I'll say they will confidently be in the top 10.
Yeah, I got a couple people coming in here talking about some of our young edge rushers. AJ Epinesa will have a breakout year, says Johnny Boy. Elliot Eisler, a little bit more high on Groot. And that's sort of where my mind went. The addition of Von Miller is going to free other people up to be more successful on defense. And you can sort of see from that pass rush summit that he's having this weekend, his veteran mentorship, his leadership, I think is going to rub off on some of these younger guys who are in attendance at that camp. So my take that I feel really confident in is that Gregory Rousseau will double his sack total from 4 in 2021 to 8 in 2022. And he's going to cement himself nationally as one of the better run defending edge players in the league. So he's going to solidify his run defending. He's going to double his sack total. He was 5th in run stop win rate last season. I wouldn't be surprised if he moves even higher up that list this season. So I'm expecting big things in year 2 from Gregory Rousseau. And that's my sort of take that I'm going with this. All right. A couple other things. What's the biggest question mark? So, and feel free, I forgot to mention this too, but feel free in the comment section as we're going along and doing these various different topics to throw your own topic in there as well, or your own question mark in there as well. Bill's question mark for the 2022 defense. What is your biggest question mark? What's the one thing you think could hold them back?
I'm copping out a little bit because I'm going to do a question mark at each level of the defense. So first question mark, starting with the back end. Is Trey White going to be ready for the opener? And if not, how many games is he going to miss? And will Kaiir Elam be able to step in and be the de facto CB1 for a period of time and hold down that secondary at the cornerback position until Trey White comes back? We saw last year, towards the end of the season, the Bills, corners kind of, they struggled a little bit in that first half of the Tampa game. They kind of got it together, right, between Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace. So it wasn't all that bad. So that's question mark number 1 on the secondary. Question mark in the middle. Can Tremaine Edmonds earn himself a new contract this year with his play? Will the additions up front on the defensive line of Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, Ed Oliver, playing with guys like Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau on the outside of him, will that help Tremaine Edmonds in a significant way in 2022 to where he really tips the scales more in the favor of those who support him and see what that potential is of him, in flashes of his play throughout the last several seasons? And then question mark on the defensive line is who's going to step up outside of Gregory Rousseau and Von Miller, right? Is AJ Epinesa, can he step up now? It's a maker. I don't want to call it make or break, but like I have big questions around AJ Epinesa, and I have questions about what Boogie Basham's role might be given his weight fluctuation. But really, the biggest question mark to me right now on the front seven or on the front defensive line is AJ Epinesa, and what is he going to be, and what is he going to contribute for this team in 2022?
Yeah, Rob comes in. He says Trey White. Obviously, that injury is concerned. How's he going to rebound from that injury? Zen Bills fan coming in saying if Poyer doesn't get paid, he's going to sandbag. I disagree. You don't want to sandbag yourself in a contract year. So he's kind of going to be forced to sort of play with his hair on fire to try to earn that contract from another team. So I respectfully disagree there. Earl Scott comes in. I like this one. Chemistry.
That's interesting.
Those 7 new players, how are they going to gel? How long is it going to take them to gel? When are they going to sort of get into a rhythm? Do you see new things from Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott? Because they have some personnel they really haven't had in a while. A lot of pass rushing interior defensive linemen. Von Miller is a different type of edge player than they've had before. Terrell Bernard as Chris Jenke comes in. How's he going to be utilized? Because he's sort of like another Matt Milano type as opposed to more of an AJ Klein type. So it'll be really interesting to see a more athletic CB2. Do we do more man coverage stuff? There's a whole bunch of new wrinkles that you could see. Chemistry could obviously be a concern as well. Devin E comes in. Von Miller in a rotation. Does he see 50% of the snaps? Does he see 60? Like what does he see compared to the last sort of finger quotes alpha edge rusher we had in Jerry Hughes, the previous alpha? Some people might not want to call him that, but in terms of the Bills, he was the alpha pass rusher the last couple of seasons. So does Von Miller get an uptick in playing time from what Jerry Hughes had in his rotation? Do the Bills go away from that rotation a little bit? My biggest question mark is one of the things that you had as your take, as one of your maybe surprises. My biggest question mark is, can they stop the run consistently? I mean, last season they were 6th in pass rush win rate, and they were 16th in run stop win rate.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a very, very good team at, stopping the pass or getting to the quarterback in terms of pressures, and a team that struggled stopping the run. Now, the IDL additions, the interior defensive linemen, it's not exactly like those two gappers that we were expecting. We talked about Fedarian Mathis 150 times on this podcast before the draft as the type of defensive tackle we were expecting. Jordan Phillips, who previously had struggled against the run. Tim Settle, known for his pass rushing. Some of these guys that we brought in, not exactly the two gappers we were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
The guys who were brought in to maybe help us get better against the run, Daquan Jones, Terrell Bernard to allow us to play a little bit more base. Shaq Lawson, if he gets into the rotation, has always been good against the run. Those seem to be the biggest additions to try to improve this run stopping, this run defense. My question is, will it be enough? So that's still going to be my question going into the season is, can we stop some of these potent rushing attacks? And we're going to dive into some of that as we get into the show as well. So let's start with edge rushers. So now we're going to work our way through the defense. We'll start with edge rushers. We'll go to the interior of the defensive line, linebackers, and then talk about the secondary and what our expectation is for each of these various different position groups. So let's start with edge rushers. What impact, and again, feel free in the comment section to let us know your thoughts for all of these topics as well. What impact do you think Von Miller will have on this defense in 2022?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, he's going to bring that sort of superstar, gravitas, if you will, to the defense. So it's not going to be like, a Mario Addison, who is a solid player, or Jerry Hughes was a solid player. And teams, knew that, but they didn't really necessarily have to specifically game plan against guys like Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison. Teams are going to have to game plan against Von Miller, and he's going to have it's going to have a cascading effect on the rest of that defensive line, right? Guys in the interior are going to have more one-on-one matchups potentially. Guys like Greg Rousseau on the other side of him on early downs or even on pass rushing downs are going to have opportunities. It's going to give guys like Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa opportunities to have one-on-one matchups when they're on the field during passing downs. And so there's that element of it on the field. There's the element of him teaching his craft to these younger guys. We talked about the young trio of Rousseau, Epinesa, and Basham needing to have those vets, to kind of bring them along. And they had Addison and Hughes last year, but now they get a bona fide superstar in Von Miller, coming to the defense. And, you look at Von Miller's, career, and I know he missed the 2020 season with that injury, but I mean, he's had until the last 2 seasons, he's had double-digit sacks 5 seasons in a row. In 2019 in Denver, he had 8. In 2021, he had 9.5, 4.5 for Denver, 5 for the Rams. So he's right there. He's probably going to give you that double-digit sack, guy that the Bills fans have been clamoring for years. That just Jerry Hughes hasn't delivered on, or whoever it has been hasn't delivered on. And so he just elevates the entire defense, especially the defensive line. And not only that, he's a closer. We talked about this before. He will close games for you late in the fourth quarter when the other team's trying to mount a comeback, or if it's in a playoff game, he has got that experience in crunch time, in big moments in games to close them out for you. You go back and watch throughout his career in Denver, go look at most of those Denver wins that they've had when Von Miller was there. There weren't a ton of blowouts. I know there's some in the Peyton Manning era, but like there are a lot of games there where late in the fourth he created a turnover, or he stopped a drive and sealed victory for the Broncos. And so that's another element that he brings, that closer's mentality that we haven't had necessarily from anyone on that defensive line, for a long time. So, I mean, you can go on and on about what he's going to bring, but those are just some of the things that come to mind.
And a great comment here from Renaissance Man. He's like, I can't see how Groot doesn't absolutely eat this season. Another component, I think, is the pressure he takes off of the other guys on the defensive line, whether it's Groot, whether it's Ed Oliver, or any of the other guys in the rotation, or any of the other guys on the interior of the defensive line. Teams have to pay attention to Von Miller. Teams have to game plan for Von Miller. And I really like the word you use there, closer, because in my notes I put what I said bona fide, speed to power. He's the type of guy who's going to pin your ears back in those pass rushing situations. And you're paying him a ton of money, right? This is a bona fide, like, you are mortgaging parts of your future to bring Von Miller into this organization. As much as he wanted to come here because of Josh Allen and because we're on the cusp, we got him to come here over LA with that bag. We paid him a ton of money.
Yep.
And when you pay someone the money, you pay Von Miller, it's not going to be good enough for him to have, 6-7 sacks and a high pressure rate like Jerry Hughes. He's got to have, and he's got to put up those box score statistics. You pay him to get the quarterback down. You pay him to force fumbles. You pay him to effect games, to close out games, as you mentioned. The mentorship stuff too, which we talked about show after show after show. It's kind of becoming redundant at this point, but that's just a bonus, right? You saw the pass rushing academy that he's throwing this week, and all the young Bills edge rushers are in attendance. So there's a ripple effect that Von Miller has throughout the entire defensive line and throughout the entirety of the defense as well. So the expectation for Von Miller, to me, you pay that man, the expectation is double-digit sacks.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, 10 sacks to me is the floor. For him. And look, I know he hasn't quite had the burst, right, since that ACL injury in 2020, or ankle injury, excuse me, in 2020. But you're talking about a guy who had double-digit sacks in all but one season prior to that
And
for the Denver Broncos.
The thing that gives me the most hope is 4 sacks in 4 playoff games last year, right? So to me, he'll be fresh in a rotation. We got a lot of talent along that defensive line. Some might argue it's untapped talent, but there's talent there. Just get me to double digits. It doesn't have to be 15, 20. You don't have to compete with TJ Watt for the league lead in sacks. I don't need that. Just give me your double digits, affect the game. And then in playoff time, I want you to go out there and get me a sack a game and be that dude in the postseason as well. So we mentioned some of that untapped talent: Gregory Rousseau, Boogie Basham, AJ Epinesa. Of those 3, who are the guys that are going to separate themselves in 2022? What are your expectations from these former first and former second round draft picks?
Well, I mean, you've touched on Rousseau a bit already, and I think my expectations are somewhat in line with yours, right? I do think that Rousseau and to me, if you're going to kind of like, if you want to rank them in order of separation, right, and like rank them in sort of how I see them impacting play this year, I'd actually put Rousseau first, Basham second, Epinesa third. I can't put Epinesa above either of those 2 guys, given given what he's shown at this point. I mean, Rousseau is obviously the stud of the group, so he's kind of like in a tier by himself, I believe. Honestly, of the 3 of them, he's going to be a starting end for the Bills. He's going to be a force in the run game. He's going to be a force as a pass rusher, I believe, as well. I think you'll see his snap count and snap share increase. You just can't teach that length. And I don't know that he's going to get the 8 sacks you mentioned, whether he doubles that or not. But I do think he will improve on his sack total of 4 from a year ago, whether that's 6 or whatever. Like that's not as important to me. I think you said a good number in 8 there. But I would have to say Rousseau is going to be the one that separates himself from
Mhm.
the other two clearly this year. And I do think Basham maybe even proves that he's going to be a little bit more valuable than Epinesa this year. And look, I'm not writing off AJ Epinesa completely, but it's kind of it's a big year for him, right? He's going to have
Yeah.
opportunity. He's got to make the most of it.
And it's not that I'm writing off AJ Epinesa. It's just that I literally have no expectations for him. Like,
Right. That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Which
I
is
just don't.
sad as a
It's
second round
sad.
pick.
You can't get me excited about AJ Epinesa. Like, nothing you do or say is going to get me excited about AJ Epinesa. If he goes out in the field and starts to show it on the field, I will start to get excited, but it's going to take him a while. We saw early on in the season last year, he had that huge game against Miami, and then he was invisible the rest of the year. So to me, it's going to take AJ Epinesa a long time to earn back my confidence or to earn back my enthusiasm as a fan. To me, my hope lies with Gregory Rousseau and Boogie Basham. I really hope that Gregory Rousseau becomes a length and strength defensive end who's dominant versus the run and gets me 8-ish sacks per season. That's all I need from Gregory Rousseau. I don't need Gregory Rousseau to be the next Mario Williams. I don't need him to be the next Bruce Smith. He was the 30th pick in the first round. If he can be a dominant run defender and get me 8 sacks a season, I'm okay with that.
Totally.
That to me is a really good 30th overall pick in left end.
8 sacks would have led the team last year. So.
Like, if that's what he is, if he is just like a middle of the road pass rusher who goes out and gets his 8, most of them are cleanup sacks and does well against the run, I am a-okay with that. I can get my pass rush elsewhere from Von Miller, from hopefully Boogie Basham. I really hope by the end of the season, Boogie Basham and that body transformation, I really hope by the end of the season, he is a left-right versatile player, kind of like Mario Addison was, who chips in 8-ish sacks of his own accord too. So a guy who moves between the left-hand side and the right-hand side, gives Rousseau, gives Miller those breathers, and chips in sacks in his own right. I think he's lost enough weight to the point where I don't want to talk about him as a 3-tech anymore because he looks like a defensive end now. Dude looks like he's like 255, 260. Like he looks like he has slimmed. Maybe not the Epinesa, like all the way down to the 240 slimmed, but he looks like he's pretty slimmed. The one thing in my notes that I didn't mention here that I want to mention before we move on is one expectation I have, or something that I want to see this season, is I would like to see a little bit more versatility from Gregory Rousseau. I want to see him schemed in different manners. I think last year they were just trying to get him comfortable and acclimated to the National Football League. I would really like to see him utilize some this year like he was utilized in college. Zero technique, over the center defensive tackle, or at least get some interior work on pass rush downs and keep him on the field in those pass rush situations, because Gregory Rousseau was very much used as a first and second down run defender last year and wasn't really given an opportunity to pin his ears back and go after the quarterback.
No, that's a good point. And with his length, I mean, he can affect the pass, from the inside or the outside, right? Getting the arms up, rushing from the interior, using the length, coming around from the exterior and reaching around and kind of, knocking that ball out. We saw him, make the play against Kansas City, obviously. But the one thing that kind of, I guess, not worries me, but the one thing where I would say is like, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him come in on, on the interior and passing rush downs. But like, if I'm thinking about kind of maybe my ideal passing rush or pass rush kind of setup, it might be like Von Miller on one edge, Greg Rousseau on one, Ed Oliver, and then like a Tim Settle or a Jordan Phillips on the interior. But again, like maybe they mix and match it a little bit, but you just find a way to get him in position to succeed, right? And that's where he's going to be fun to watch this year, Gregory.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are ready to see what he can do in year 2.
Yeah, and Jessica Times makes a great point. There have been a number of Cover One shorts the last couple of days. You can catch them here on YouTube and on social media as well, just showing what an excellent job Gregory Rousseau did against the run last year. And he had historically for a rookie, a pretty good season against the run. And remember that heavy Bills rotation, some of the guys who he was up with historically, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, in terms of like run stops and things like that. Those guys did it on way more snaps than Gregory Rousseau did it. And Eric Kay coming in to sort of finish things off, saying he's already tops in the league against the run. Like I said, he was number 5 in run stop win rate, but you got to be able to consistently do things in the National Football League to get that reputation, right? Like if he just does it his rookie year, he falls off a cliff, then he's no longer considered, an above average run defender or an elite run defender. You got to do it consistently for 2, 3, 4 years in order to start to get that national recognition, to sort of get that national love, unless you play like a skill position or do flashy things like Micah Parsons with the sacks or Jamar Chase with the yards and the touchdowns and the things of that nature. So in terms of getting national attention for being a really good run defender and having pundits notice you and shout you out, it takes 2, 3, 4 years of you doing it consistently to really get there. And that's sort of the point I was trying to make with that one. All right. So how do you expect the rotation to play out? You sort of mentioned a little bit of what you expect on pass rushing downs. How do you expect the rotation to play out on the edge for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I mean, look, I do expect Rousseau and I mean, I expect Rousseau to be the main early down edge player, right? I don't know that Von Miller, like, I know you're paying him a ton, but you're probably not going to use him a ton on early downs. You probably use him some. I wouldn't expect that he will be totally absent from early down work because it's not, teams pass on first down and you kind of want him there for that potentially. But I think if Shaq Lawson is on the team and you have AJ Epinesa, who's kind of, if he has a calling card, if you will, he might have that as a decent run defender on the edge. Like it's probably some combination of Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, Rousseau on early downs on the edge. And then on pass rushing downs, you're obviously going to have Von Miller, Rousseau again, and Basham, right? Are probably your main pass rushing players on the edge. So then you start looking at that and you're saying, well, Rousseau, we want to use him on early downs and we want to use him on passing downs. He's gonna need to prove that he's got the, the conditioning to do that. And I'm sure he will, but the Bills coaching staff also has to be willing to kind of buck the trend of giving guys like a ton of snaps. Right. So, and when I say that, I mean like using the rotation that they have used over the past couple of years. Are they going to be willing to let Rousseau play heavier snaps, right? Like in that 70%, 80% range as a second year player? That's where I'm going to be very interested to see. Because like you said, in our minds, we feel like he could develop into that complete edge player, but to save him, how much are they going to kind of spell him? They're not going to take him off the field on early downs, given his run defending prowess. Like there's just no way. But Von Miller, on the other hand, that's where I'm going to find it interesting. I think some people were mentioning in the chat about his snap share. I mean, Von Miller, you look at his snap percentage right over his career, he's never really been below 75%. He's been in the 80s a lot and even in the 90s. And that as recently as last year, he was like 75% snap count still. So he's still going to get some early down work, but you have Shaq Lawson, you have AJ Epinesa. So, utilize those guys on early downs as well.
I feel like you're probably going to see Von Miller come in somewhere between 60 and 65, which I think even for the Bills is high.
Yep.
It's still more than like Jerry Hughes is getting, but I think it'll be less than his career average because I think maybe one of the selling points too was the fact that he gets to play in a rotation, so he gets to be a little bit more fresher. But this is one of those reasons why I'm not that high on AJ Epinesa. I think the early rundown guys will be Epinesa and Rousseau, and I think the pass rushing guys will be Von Miller. And I think Boogie Basham will get in there in a lot of pass rushing situations. But I do still, as you said, I want to see Rousseau, even if it means he gets up to 60% snap share. I want to see Rousseau out there on passing downs as well. If it's at the zero tech on the interior or whether it's on the edge, like get Gregory Rousseau out there, give him some more pass rushing down opportunities as well. So whether it's Shaq Lawson or AJ Epinesa, maybe those guys can free him up to do a little bit more pass rushing. But more than likely, it's going to involve giving him more snaps, giving him 55, 60% as opposed to under 50%, which he was last season. All right. So everyone's favorite, and we're not going to sit here and pretend like pressure rate and things don't matter. This is obviously a very pro pressure rate DVOA type of podcast. Cover One in general is a very, very much a pro pressure type of podcast. But we like to have a little bit of fun here. So let's have some fun. Let's predict the Buffalo Bills edge rusher sack totals for the 2022 season, keeping in mind that in 2021, the Buffalo Bills were tied with the Cincinnati Bengals for 11th in team sacks with 42. So how are you doling out these sacks for these edge rushers?
I'll give Von Miller a nice even 10. Maybe he'll get a bonus
Mhm.
11th. So that that's the floor I think for him,
Yeah.
as we both mentioned. Like he's got to get the double digits. So I'll set the bar at 10. Anything over that, I'll consider a bonus. I know you're paying him a ton of
Yeah.
money, but we also know the Bills' defense by its nature hasn't lent itself to individual huge sack totals. But again, you're not paying Von Miller all that money to be a 6 sack a year guy. He should
No,
be
you
at
are not.
10 easily. So I'll say 10 plus. I'll that's how I'll phrase it for
Mhm.
Vaughn. And then between Groot, Basham, Epinesa, Lawson, I'm gonna set that number around 15 combined. I might be a little bit lower
Mhm.
than you
Yeah.
on the totals there. But again, we have to remember, like, 42 a year ago.
Yeah.
We look at the team a year ago. Addison led with 7. We had Rousseau with 4. I mean, Ed Oliver was next with 4. Obata had 3.5, right, from the edge. Boogie Basham at 2.5. So, like, I don't expect it to be huge totals from the rest of the guys, right? Like Rousseau will get an uptick, but I still think 15 is a reasonable number, really mainly between 3 guys, right? Epinesa, Basham, and Groot to have 15 combined, I think is fair. And that gives, about 25 plus between just the edge
Mhm.
players, which I think is a totally fair number. And maybe, maybe high in some regards, but I think 25 total between the edge rushers, 10 plus from Vaughn, and then 15 from the others combined is kind of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, see, so my expectations are a little bit higher than yours. To me, I like I said, Von Miller to me needs to get at least 10 sacks. So I put him down here for 10 sacks. You don't pay him for just pressures. You pay him for getting quarterbacks to the ground and forcing fumbles. So Von Miller, I got with 10. That's my expectation for him.
Mm-hmm.
Between Rousseau, Epinesa, Basham, and Lawson, the other 4 guys who should be rotating in one, way, shape, form, or another, 20 sacks between them.
Okay.
I would prefer it be like Basham and Rousseau each clean up and get about 8 apiece, and then Epinesa and Lawson chip in 2 or 3 here. I would prefer that. But either way, from those 4 guys, I need 20 sacks to bring my cumulative edge rusher total in sacks to 30 sacks. So 30 sacks before you get to defensive tackles, linebackers, bring them into the equation, secondary players into the equation to try to get you those other 15 to 20 sacks to get you up with, last year's totals, and maybe even elevating yourself into the upper echelon of the league as well. And the Steelers led the NFL in sacks last year with 55. So we were 13 sacks short of that. So that's what we're looking to catch up to. And we're shifting our focus now to the interior of the defensive line. And let's start with former first round, top 10 pick, Ed Oliver. We exercised his 5th-year option.
Mm-hmm.
In his career, he started off 5 sacks as a rookie, 3 sacks in the second year, 4 sacks last year for a career total of 12 sacks in 3 seasons. However, analytically, he was 7th in IDL pass rush win rate in 2021, and he was 9th in IDL run stop win rate in 2021. Number 8 was Harrison Phillips. So top 10 in both pass rush win rate and run stop win rate. So analytically speaking, a dominant season from Ed Oliver. But what are your expectations for him coming into year 4 with a lot of new teammates around him on the defensive line?
Yeah, and you rattled off his sack numbers, 5, 3, 4, the last couple seasons. I do think he'll set a career high in sacks this year. I think he gets to 6. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be a double digit sort of sack guy from the interior. He has that potential, and I think his trajectory could set him to on that course towards a double digit sack season from the interior, but I'm not ready to go there yet. I think he just continues to progress on the trajectory he's on, and I think that he will become. Um, I'm not going to say he'll become a household name, right, on the national networks and
Mhm.
on the national level from guys on like NFL Network and ESPN. But I do think that from, football analysts that we see across social media and maybe some more of the specialized stuff we see, I think he will start getting some attention, right, outside of just the Bills community. And I think that will happen because he's got, a different band around him this year with guys like Von
Mhm.
Miller, and Daquan Jones and Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips back. I think Ed Oliver is primed for a big year. And I think that in a way, um, I get the sense that, like, not necessarily from him, but I get a feeling almost that, like people don't fully respect his game and
Mhm.
kind of what he brings to the table. And I'm not like, I don't know, singularly like individual people who I would call out on that, but like that's been kind of like an undercurrent of um what we've kind of felt around Ed Oliver's path so far. Always a top 10 pick. Has he lived up to expectations? Like he definitely did last year, and I think he will continue to do so in 2022. So I have high expectations from him. A great 2021. I think he'll set career high in sacks. I'm not ready to go double digits yet, but I do think he will have a
Mhm.
phenomenal season and get some Pro Bowl consideration as well this year.
Yeah, someone earlier said Steve Burns came in and said that I was a little optimistic with 30 stacks for my edge rushers. My optimism for this defensive line is the highest it's been since the Jim Schwartz era defensive line. Like that is the type of talent that I think that if they reach their potential, the Buffalo Bills have along this defensive front. I think this is a team capable of pushing 50 sacks this season and being top 5 in the league in sacks. Now, Leslie Frazier can bring me back down to earth real quick in the first month of the season with some of that 111 stuff. But, I'm very optimistic. I'm very high on this defensive line. And I think Von Miller is going to bring the best out in a lot of players. And one of those players is Ed Oliver. My expectations, like I might be disappointed because my expectations for Ed Oliver this season are sky high. I think he's going to take his game to the next level. Steve Burns made another great point. He's not going to be as double teamed as he was last season, or at least he shouldn't be. I think Ed Oliver could push double digit sacks, and I think he's going to make a ton of game changing plays this year. So my expectation for him is to become a household name, because I think with Von Miller and being on prime time so much, you're going to have extra national attention drawn to this defensive line. So if a guy like Gregory Rousseau or a guy like Boogie Basham or a guy like Ed Oliver pop off and they have an 8 to 10 sack season and they make some big splash plays in primetime games, the national attention will come with that. Not to mention that Ed Oliver is a very charismatic personality. Ed Oliver was already sort of a household name from the pre-draft process, being one of the top high school
Yeah.
recruits, one of the best players in college football, etc. So all being a top 10 pick. So all of these different things, my expectations are sky high for Ed Oliver, which likely means that I'll end up being disappointed, but he could still have a solid season and not
I
meet
mean,
those
if he gets
expectations.
6 to 7 sacks from the interior, like
Oh
that's
yeah,
still
I mean,
pretty damn good.
because we're not even talking about pressures either, right? Like we're not
Yeah.
even bringing pressures into this equation. Like you see, like, oh, he had 6 sacks. That's cool. That's good. But oh, he had 6 sacks, but 3 of them were strip sacks, and some of them were forced fumbles in a big game, and he was wreaking havoc in run defense, and he was just creating pressures and forcing guys out of the pocket and forcing incompletions and forcing interceptions. There's only so much you can relay in a box score statistics. How many times did we talk last year about how great of a game Ed Oliver had, and his stat line was like 2 tackles.
Yep.
Like so he can obviously have a huge season irregardless of his sack total or his box score numbers, but I just think with the addition of Von Miller, it's going to be a lot to clean up. And I think that Ed Oliver is going to be someone in there in the middle of that defense wreaking havoc and cleaning a lot of that stuff up. So speaking of that, how much is he going to play? How do you expect these rotations to play out for the Buffalo Bills along the interior this season?
Yeah, I mean, similar to kind of Gregory Rousseau when we're talking about like how you want him in for rundowns and passing downs. Like Ed Oliver should be the main guy on the interior this season, right? He should get the most snaps, in my opinion. I think that you're probably going to start out with Oliver as your 3 tech on rundowns and Daquan as your 1 tech, right, on early
Mhm.
downs. So I would imagine it'll be Oliver and Daquan as your first kind of interior rotation through. I think it'll be Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle as your second rotation through. But in pass rushing situations, I think it could get really interesting, right? You could do a mix and match of different guys coming in. If Ed Oliver needs a breather, you could go to a Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips pass rush, because we know Jordan Phillips has shown that kind of from the interior, and Tim Settle has as well. I think that'll be a very interesting pass rush situation should Ed Oliver need a breather. And if he doesn't, then take your pick, right? Pair Ed Oliver with either Jordan Phillips or Tim Settle on pass rush situations. What I think could be an interesting combination would be a Daquan Jones, Tim Settle combination as well. Again, that would be more for early downs, I think, if you wanted to give Ed Oliver a breather. But I would say the main rotation through on early downs is going to be Oliver, Daquan. If you need a backup situation there, Phillips and Settle. And then pass rushing situations where you can really get mix and match. I wouldn't expect Daquan Jones to get a lot of run on passing down situations. So that should be kind of a 3-man rotation between Oliver, Phillips, and Settle is kind of how I would see it playing out.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's going to be Oliver, and it's going to be, I think, Daquan Jones, and then that second unit will likely be Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips. It'll be interesting to see if they keep a fifth guy, like if they keep a Eli Anku to keep another bigger body.
Had a sack last year.
Yeah, so Brandon Bryant is a name I've heard a ton in OTAs, so maybe he works his way in there somehow, but they got to figure out which one of these two guys can sort of fill that one tech role, whether it's Jordan Phillips or it's Tim Settle. Likely it's going to be Tim Settle. One of them is going to have to do it on that second unit. But in pass rushing situations, that's where Daquan Jones is out of the picture, I think, for the most part. Yep. And you get to have a little bit of fun. Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, these guys are all super intriguing when it comes to pass rushing situations. And again, I think I'm setting myself up for a lot of disappointment with some of my defensive line predictions. We're about to get into sacks in a second, and I completely went overboard there as well. But Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, and Ed Oliver, I'll say it before and I'll say it again. I think all three of those players, they are star players. One is getting paid. The other two will get paid in the future. You got to get your money's worth with these guys, and you're not getting your money's worth at 50% snap share. Ed Oliver, Gregory Rousseau, and Von Miller, I understand the need to rotate, should all be seeing 60% snap share. Like, they need to be on the field. You're the best players on your defensive line. There are a million positives and a million benefits to rotating, keeping guys fresh for the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But these are your dogs, man. And you got to ride your dogs. Rousseau, Miller, and Ed Oliver should all be seeing 60% of the snaps, because Ed Oliver is a very good run defender. So him and Daquan Jones will be really good on early downs. And I don't want him off the field in those pass rushing situations either. So to me, Ed Oliver needs to be on the field 60% of the time, just like Rousseau and just like Von Miller.
Yep.
And that leads us to the next part, which is sacks. So again, I got a little freaky deaky with it. I said Ed Oliver 8 sacks. I said Phillips 5 sacks, Settle 5 sacks, Daquan Jones 2 sacks. So I truly do. I expect the interior pass rush to be our biggest strength in 2022. Oliver, Phillips, and Settle are all guys that have a knack for getting at the quarterback. There are times where Daquan Jones is a guy who can push the pocket and help clean things up or make life easier for the people around him. So if that interior pass rush is that good, you get 30 from the edge, 20 from the interior. Again, like I said, I went a little overboard here. That's 50. And that puts you behind 5 behind last year's league leader, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we haven't even gotten into the contributions from linebackers and DBs. So I went buck wild. I expect to be disappointed.
You expect this Bills team to lead the NFL in sacks is what you're kind of alluding to, it seems like. I was, again, a little more conservative. For those who watch the show, they probably aren't surprised. I've got, as a unit, I've got this unit kind of coming in around 15 sacks total, which I think is fair, but also strong, right? You got Oliver. I think I'm, projected. I said 6 before. I say 6 to 8 for him. I think Phillips and Settle combine maybe for around 6 to 8. And then Daquan Jones maybe chips in that courtesy sack or two, a la Star Latulele did every once in a
Mhm.
while for the Bills, and puts them right around that maybe 15 to 18 sack range as a group, which I think is strong. And I think with Ed Oliver leading the way, in that 6 to 8 range, I think that's totally fair. And then
Mhm.
you kind of compare that now to kind of what my prediction was for the edge, around 25, around 15 here. I mean, that gets you to 40 already. And again, like you said, without adding in the linebackers and DBs yet, you're already sitting there at 40, right around probably top 10-ish in the NFL in sacks, or maybe just outside before you even
Mhm.
get to adding in the linebacker DB sacks, which will get you very easily into the top 10. So that's kind of where I have it through these two groups, around 40, 40, maybe top end 43, 44
Mhm.
total for these two groups combined.
All right, transitioning now to linebackers. We're going to start with just sort of the general expectations for the linebackers. You sort of already touched on this when we talked about some of the question marks. Obviously, I think the biggest storyline in 2022 for our defense, outside of the introduction of Von Miller into this defense,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be, is can Tremaine Edmonds do enough to justify a second contract?
Yep.
That is going to be one of the biggest talking points throughout
Yep.
the 2022 season. It's not the two gappers we were expecting, but there's a lot of beef in front of him now. Even if they are more pass rush leaning than they are maybe two gap leaning, there's a lot of beef in front of Tremaine Edmonds now, and some pass rushers to boot. So Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, what are your general expectations for this linebacker unit in 2022?
I mean, my using the word expectations means that it's not all that different than what my expectations were a year ago.
Mhm.
Delivery on those expectations may be different, but my expectations is that Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano will have very strong years independently, and as a unit together, they will continue to be a nice duo. Matt Milano, um, got the contract from the Bills prior to the season ago, and he's delivered when he's been on the field. And so I don't really have any concern for Matt Milano. I think his standing within Bills Mafia and within the sort of analyst community is sound. I would like to see maybe the linebackers be used a little bit more creatively this year, and maybe the addition of Terrell Bernard into the group kind of hints that that may be the case, being a little bit more versatile with kind of where their alignments are. But Tremaine Edmonds,
Mhm.
like you said, the expectations are high on him. And if those guys can in front of him can be an improvement over what we had last year, like you mentioned, not the two gapping guys, but like he's gotta earn that new contract this year one way or another. He's gonna be competing against other guys like Dawson Knox and Oliver for new contracts. Can he step
Mhm.
up? But my general expectations are not all that different, other than I would say like maybe a few tweaks of creativity I'd like to see with the linebacker group. I loved it 2 years ago when they used AJ Klein as a blitzer against Seattle. I love it when they bring Milano in on blitzes. I love it when they bring Tremaine on blitzes. I'd like to see maybe a little bit
2017
more of that.
Lorenzo.
Yeah, I'd like to see a little more creativity out of the linebacker group. And as we're about to get to, I think adding Terrell
Mm.
Bernard to the group does hint towards that possibly.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my expectation for the linebackers in 2022 are the same as they were in 2021. Just
Yep.
continue to do what you do. They're one of the best linebacker duos in the league. Are they perfect? No. There are things they can improve on. So just continue to improve and progress at the rate you're improving and progressing. Hopefully you're going to have better play in front of you in 2022. Fingers crossed. But, as Walter Scales comes in and says, hey, Starr, Murphy, Addison, Jefferson, Butler,
Hmm.
they were all supposed to be better versions of themselves in our system, and we couldn't wait to cut all of them. But one thing I will say about the linebackers, and Daryl Ladson comes in and says that he's with me. He's between the 30. He has 30 plus himself on our D end, on our D line in terms of sacks, and this is the most excited he's been in a long time. He wants us to exceed 50 sacks.
I mean, it's possible. It's
I think
definitely possible.
I think part of that is including linebackers and being aggressive. Leslie Frazier maybe going a little bit against his nature now that Von Miller is there and being aggressive. It'll probably take a little bit more man-to-man defense, which you might not see it until the second half of the season when Trey White and Kyer Elam are across from each other and fully healthy. But I want to see those linebackers used as blitzers more. Matt Milano, I think, could have way more sacks in his career than he has. I mean, that dude gets to the quarterback when he A-gap and B-gap blitzes. Terrell Bernard was known in college as a rather good pass rusher when asked to rush the passer and get after the quarterback. So to me, utilizing those linebackers and being a little bit more aggressive and sending some more exotic looks at the quarterback is something that I hope the Buffalo Bills have in store in 2022. Speaking of Terrell Bernard, what impact or role do you think Terrell Bernard is going to have? Because to me, I think it's bigger than people expect. You look at our third round picks in the McDermott era. Harrison Phillips played right away. Dawson Knox played right away. Devin Singletary played right away. Zach Moss played right away. The one exception would be Spencer Brown. Wasn't supposed to play right away, but ended up doing what? Playing right away. So what are your expectations in terms of role and playing time for Terrell Bernard, our third round pick this year?
I mean, he'll definitely have a role. I mean, we were sitting there during the draft thinking like, okay, the Bills passed on Dylan Parham. They passed on other guys. Like they really, really wanted Terrell Bernard to add to this defense. And I think that gives you some versatile options, right? He gives you the potential option to play as a nickel, right? In place of Taron Johnson, maybe to help in Rundy. Maybe it gives you an option to play a little bit more 4-3 and kind of beef up. You mentioned like the question mark you had around can the Bills' run defense be better this year with the fact that they didn't really add a ton of two-gap. Well, maybe Terrell Bernard plays a role in helping on the run defense, right? And so I think he is going to have playing time. I think he'll play on special teams a ton. And I think he will. The Bills, maybe if they want to be a little bit, it's funny. I say be more creative, yet talking about their base defense, right? So it's kind of like an oxymoron, but like they may be willing to kind of use Terrell Bernard on the field in situations that they didn't otherwise have a player, and then were forced to kind of keep Taron Johnson there on obvious running downs. And not that Taron Johnson's a bad player in run defense, but Terrell Bernard is beefier, right? And he's got that nose for the ball. He's got that aggressiveness like Taron has. And you maybe save Taron Johnson and extend his career a bit because he's a little bit smaller in stature and he doesn't have to get his nose is dirty in situations like that. So I like him getting some decent playing time this year. I don't know what that equates to from a snap count percentage, maybe 25% or a little higher than that. But they can use him very creatively, situationally in run defense, situationally as a blitzer. He was very good at that in college. So a lot of options they have for a guy like Terrell Bernard. And you start to see after you look into him and watch the film room that Eric and the guys do, like, why the Bills were excited about drafting this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see the Bills use more 43 defense in 2022. Now, I didn't call it 43 base. That's one thing that I'm trying to stop from doing, not calling it a base defense. Why? Because the Buffalo Bills' strength is nickel, and nickel is base. And I think that the Buffalo Bills nickel base, it will still be their base defense in 2022. I still think they'll be a top 5 unit in the NFL in terms of percentage of snaps played out of the nickel, but maybe not be number one, like with a bullet, like they were the past 2 seasons, just top 5. Right. So I'm thinking games like Baltimore, I'm thinking games like New England, they come to mind, having the option to go 43, having the option to be a little beefier at the line of scrimmage and not put Taron Johnson in some of those awkward situations that you did last year in the Colts game, or you did last year in that sort of windy game. You saw last year they brought Saran Neal out in that second Patriots game. Well, you don't have to do that now. You can bring Terrell Bernard out as opposed to Saran Neal. I think Bernard's going to end up seeing 30% of the snaps with Johnson seeing the other 70. So it'll be like 70-30 split between Johnson and Bernard. And Bernard could see even more than 30% of the snaps if Tremaine Edmonds or Matt Milano get hurt or go down, which is something that each of them have done over the past 2 seasons. The film room guys did a great job. You can go back and you can look at some of the film room stuff. on Terrell Bernard. He can match up and cover just like Matt Milano. He's a really good blitzer, just like Matt Milano. More of a weak side guy than the middle guy, but Brandon Bean made a point to say he can do both if we need him to. So he's the new AJ Klein in terms of one of those top two guys gets hurt. He's the first guy who's going to slide in. So Terrell Bernard could see more than I think 30% of the snaps. Like if you take away AJ Klein's snaps when he wasn't replacing Edmonds or Milano, it was probably like 5 or 10%, right? Like it wasn't very high. It was goal line. It was, third quarter of the Colts game when we realized it just wasn't working anymore. The Patriots game, even though I think AJ Klein was out that game with COVID, so it was like Tyrell Dodson. So if you take away AJ Klein's snaps replacing the top two, 5-10%. It's off the top of my head. I'm guesstimating. I think it'll be significantly higher with Terrell Bernard. I think it'll push 30 or in the 25% range, like you said. All right. That brings us to the secondary, the final part. Let's start with the easy one. What are your general expectations for Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer this year? We don't even we could have separated it corners and safeties. But we're just going to go general secondary because this one should be quick, right?
Yeah, I mean, the expectations are what they always are for these two guys. Never come off the field, both push for all Pro Bowl seasons, generate turnovers, be the, emotional leaders on that defense like they have been, and really just protect the back end and prevent those big plays. We know the Bills are one of the best teams in the league at preventing, 20-plus yard plays. So I expect that to continue. Like there's no sign that either of these guys' plays has dropped off. In fact, you could say that they've gotten better kind of as they've gotten older together as a unit. And that's the one thing we talk about chemistry with like the new faces on the defensive line, right? And in the front seven, these guys chemistry when they're on the field together is second to none in the league, and so they will continue to play at such an extremely high level. That's my expectation for them.
Yeah, I mean, my expectations do not change for these two. Continue to play at an all-pro level. My expectation is Micah Hyde will be a second or a first-team all-pro again. Jordan Poyer will be a first or second-team all-pro again. Keep playing at an all-pro level because this is their now fourth, fifth year in the system together. Nothing's really changed other than Jordan Poyer's happiness with his contract. And someone mentioned at the top of the show, like, well, you could see Jordan Poyer's play drop off. No, he's not going to drop off and play because then no one's going to want to pay him this offseason. If anything, you're going to see him play with a little extra oomph to go out there and try to get paid when his contract is up this offseason. I think the expectations continue to be all pro, and you could even see an increase in flash plays. We've just spent the last 30 minutes gushing about our pass rush. If the pass rush is better and we're getting to the quarterback, you're going to see a lot more balls just kind of, quarterbacks close their eyes and toss them up in the air. Tip ball situations, ducks coming out of the quarterback's hands when it's more than just playing Tua Tagovailoa. You're going to see those kind of things from opposing offenses, and guys like Jordan Poyer, guys like Micah Hyde, they can take advantage of those things. So definitely still can expect all pro play out of those two. All right. How will cornerback 2 shake out when Trey White is healthy? Because we spent 2 shows ago, we spent some time. It looks like the time frame for Trey White coming back from his injury is going to be somewhere between the Titans game and the Packers game after the bye week. So somewhere in that time frame, he's going to be back. Sometime in that time frame, he'll get his sea legs under him. He'll be acclimated. Once he's back, once he's acclimated, once he's playing, how does CB2 shake out?
I mean, CB2 should be, unless something weird really happens, should be Kyrie Elam, right? I mean, the Bills gave up a 4th round pick to move up 2 spots to go get him in the 1st round this year. It's the first time since drafting Trey White that they've made significant investment in the draft at the corner position. And he should be the CB2, right? I mean, he's going to say all the right things, and the coaching staff's going to say all the right things as far as he's going to earn his spot, this and that. But like, you don't trade up in the 1st round to draft this guy for him to not be your CB2 when Trey White's there. All right. So like, Kyrie Elam will be the CB2, and that's my expectation. Will he have his growing pains? Sure. But like, he's he is a different type of athlete than
Yep.
the Bills have had at CB2 in the Sean McDermott era. And to be honest, he might even be a better athlete than Trey White, just as a pure athlete. Not saying he's a better corner than Trey White, so don't misconstrue that. I'm just saying athletically, he could be the best athlete in the room, and he should be the CB2.
And a lot of people, a lot is being made about, Dane Jackson not allowing, a single touchdown last season. But as you just mentioned, Kyer Elam was the first round pick for a reason. When Trey White is healthy, Kyer Elam should be CB2. And that has a trickle down on the rest of our defense and the rest of our roster, because now Dane Jackson, who stepped in and played admirably, now he slides into that DB or that CB4 role. Maybe in practice, you work him a little bit more at nickel. If Teron Johnson gets hurt, maybe now you have a more sturdy backup nickel in Dane Jackson. If Trey White or Kyer Elam go down, you have a guy to plug and play at the boundary in Dane Jackson. One of the things that you saw him do late last season was you saw him gunning on special teams, and he was pretty solid at it. So if Trey White gets back rather quickly and Dane Jackson is CB4, you can now use him as gunner on special teams, and maybe that frees up a roster spot that would have gone to Tywan Jones. So you just freed up a roster spot by having Kyer Elam as your CB2. So I think there's a trickle down not only on the defense, but on the roster as well, if Dane Jackson slides into that CB4 role. So quickly, any other thoughts or expectations for this secondary? Could be Teron Johnson, could be the depth. Any other sort of thoughts or expectations?
No, I mean, I think there will be initial growing pains with Kyer Elam, but I think that he will show enough flashes early on if Trey White's not back for Bills fans to really see that potential in him. And I think that by the middle of the season, and once Trey's back and he can kind of slide in that CB2 role, they're going to be in really good shape. Assuming Trey comes back 100% and there's nothing there. Truth to Heart says, well, what if Dane and Kyer are both having great seasons?
You work back Trey White slowly, in my opinion. Then you would say, who's having the better season, Kyer or Dane? You're likely picking Kyer because of his first round pedigree, and you're platooning Trey White with Dane Jackson. And then you're slowly working him back. Instead of just putting Trey White in as the starter, you're like, all right, Trey, you're going to go in for 3 series this game, then 5 series the next. Like, you can't bench Trey White. You pay him too much money. He's too integral to your team. He's a cornerstone franchise player. So it's a good problem to have. And it will then be nice to have Dane Jackson as your CB4 in case Trey White struggles to come back from that injury or somebody else gets hurt. But to me, even if they're both playing well, you can't keep Trey White on the bench for long.
Yeah. And like, I'm sorry, but like Dane Jackson's going to the bench in that case. Like, I mean, it's just
what's tricky about that is I believe Dane Jackson is a restricted free agent this offseason. So that makes it tricky come contract time, whether you can actually get more term on him and, whether someone tries to make an RFA offer on him like they did with Ryan Bates, etc. Whether you could not tender him and sign him to a cheaper deal. All of those things then come into play if Dane Jackson plays super well, this season in Trey's absence. One expectation I have for the secondary that we haven't talked about is he possibly has a smaller role this year, and by a very small margin. But Teron Johnson, I think the 2022 is the year he finally gets sort of like the national pundits to really start talking about him and shouting him out as one of, if not the best nickel cornerbacks in the game. Some people might argue that like he's already there and people already talk about him like that, but I think you're just going to get quality play from him this year, even if there's less quantity of his play. With some of these bigger bodies up front, I think it's going to make Teron Johnson's life a little bit easier. He could play a little bit more loose at the line of scrimmage, and he could feel a little bit more comfortable in dropping back. So I think you're going to see, Teron Johnson making a lot of plays this year, and it's still going to be super interesting and super awkward getting used to watching the number 7 fly around on defense. Hopefully he picks up on Trayvon Diggs' ability to intercept the ball, but not Trayvon Diggs' ability to let every receiver go for like 150 yards on him.
Oh my God. I still don't like it. I just don't, man. I loved him with the 24, but I mean, Kair's got 24 now, so
I was hoping Kair would be 5. Damn you, Marcus Stevenson.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows? Could still change, but doubtful. But yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Maybe like gets Tehran out of harm's way in certain situations on running plays where maybe we've seen him get dinged up. Obviously, last year he was fine, but he's not the biggest dude, so I'm fine with that. Mr. Diggs here says, I can see a high amount of fumbles the Bills defense create. Turnovers are different. How many we jump on is luck.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a defense that is going to have the ability to force a decent number of turnovers this season and really flip the field and help the Buffalo Bills build some leads if the offense continues to sort of chug along like they have in years past. All right, so to close things out here, got a little fill in the blank, and people in the comment section, feel free to join us for this little game of fill in the blank here. But Dave, I want you to fill in this blank, and in comment section, you can as well. By the end of the 2020 season, the Buffalo Bills defense will be considered a top blank unit by most national pundits. So I'm not asking for like total yardage or DVOA or anything like that. I'm just saying like the general national media person or general person who views the entire landscape of the NFL, they'll consider the Buffalo Bills a top blank unit. We already got John Curran coming in saying 10 and Ronald R coming in and saying 5. Dave, what Eliezer dreaming big, saying top 3. I mean, I shouldn't say dreaming big. We were number 1 last year, but Mr. Diggs says top 3 as well. Dave, what do you got?
Yeah, they were first last year. I say they're going to be in. I said 5 to 7, top 5 to 7 range. I think that the schedule is harder this year. Obviously, not sure if Trey White's going to be back. I think that will have, not a. I don't want to downplay Trey White being out by saying, well, we have guys and we did okay with him, without him last year. Like that's fine, but like you're still way better with him on the field. So there's going to be a little bit of that. Like, what about the chemistry thing we talked about earlier on the front 7 with a ton of new faces? How big of an impact is Von Miller going to have early in the season? Is he going to be more of an impactful later in the season? I still think it's going to be a very, very, very good defense. And so I think top 5 to 7 is fair. It's going to be very hard to repeat as the number 1 defense. Not saying it can't be done, but if you're still a top 5 unit in 2022, that's still pretty damn good.
Yeah, I put top 10 as well. And for some of the things that guys like John and Truth to Heart said, we play some better offenses in 2022. There are very few cakewalks on our schedule. Trey White's probably going to miss the start of the season. That plays a role, I believe. Rookies will be playing, or a rookie in Kaiir Elam will be taking his lumps. That plays a role as well. I think you're going to see some growing pains with some new player types up front, and it's going to take them a while to sort of gel and get comfortable. Not to mention, you probably can't go and do a lot of man-to-man stuff until Trey White gets back and gets his sea legs under him, and Kaiir Elam starts to get used to the league a little bit. So that might affect some of the pass rushing stuff. So they're still going to be very good. I just don't need them to be number 1 until we get to the playoffs. When we get to the playoffs, I need them firing on all cylinders, and I need them to be the league's best defense in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, just like Josh Allen was the best quarterback in the playoffs, right? That's when it matters, and that's why you went out and got Von Miller to close games in the playoffs. Jessica says top 5, but how much garbage time will the defense?
And that's sort of why I said in regards to like what national pundits would think, because those type of things play a role. Garbage time, quarterbacks that were injured, things like that. So there's a bunch of different things that play a role. And that's why I sort of generalized it. Like at the end of the year, most people are going to consider the Bills a top blank unit. So a little bit more subjective than say like the box score or the DVOA or things like that. Sophia comes in and says top 5 at the very best. And he says, wait, you have the defense with 60 sacks? I didn't say 60 sacks. All right. I said 50 to 55. I wasn't going as high as 60. I know I was getting a little loose with it, but I think my math was 50 before the linebackers and the corners. So That's not, I don't think you're getting 10 sacks between your linebackers and your DBs. So I wasn't going with 60 sacks, but like I said, I think there will be growing pains to start, but I do think once the playoff rolls around, there'll be the number one unit with a bullet. Like, I don't think you're going to see a repeat of 13 seconds, fingers crossed, in the next postseason. I think this is a defensive unit that will be lights out, an offensive unit that'll be firing all cylinders. A lot of times winning a Super Bowl is all about getting your timing right, getting hot at the right time. And for the Buffalo Bills, it might take some time with Trey White getting his sea legs under him, Kyrie Elam getting back, some of the new players gelling together. It might take a while for some of these players to gel, even on the offense with Ken Dorsey and some of the new weapons there on offense, Aaron Cromer, some new, running systems, etc. So it might take some time. It might not be the prettiest to start the year, but I think this is a team, and we talked about this on the schedule show. The back half of the schedule could be what we ride to the 1 seed, and then once we get the 1 seed, we ride that to the Super Bowl. So sky high expectations here at the Air Raid Hour.
I mean, that's fair, right? I mean, everyone should have high expectations for this team this year. You went out and you splashed with Von Miller. You went out, you got your CB2 in the first round. You retooled the interior of that defensive line. You went out and you drafted Khalil Shakir and you signed Jamison Crowder and you gave Stephon Diggs that extension, right? I mean, like, you drafted James Cook. Like, there's all these things. Like, everyone should have high expectations this year. Like, it's not one of those situations where Josh Allen and the team was an unknown a couple of years ago and you're like, oh, they're going to go to the Super Bowl, and like no one really knew. Like, the team is very, very good and expectations should be high. And we need to get used to that, I think, as fans and as analysts and whatever you are in the Bills community as a fan. Like, I know we've been hurt before. I know it. But like, it's that we're at the point now in the trajectory of this iteration of the Bills team where the expectations should be high. And if they don't meet expectations, as Bruce always says, right? Expectations versus reality equals disappointment, or whatever the phrase is he uses.
I'm going to be hurting.
So look, that's fine to have high expectations, but just kind of, just know that it's okay. We're all in this together for this year, for this run. So let's do it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Again, we're not a show without you guys in the comment section, keeping us honest, chiming in with all the great comments that you guys do on a weekly basis. Remember, we are Mondays only from now up until the regular season, when we will likely be Mondays and pregame. There might be some slight shakeups with the Cover One schedule once the regular season starts, but in all likelihood, we'll still be Mondays and pregame. So make sure that you stay tuned with us. If you are listening to us live still, thank you for staying the whole time. Appreciate the 125 or so of you. Smash that like button on your way out if you haven't already. If you are listening on demand or watching on demand, make sure you smash that like button. Helps us with the algorithm. Leave a comment in the comment section. It could be a question, it could be a take, it could be a comment or a piece of feedback to something that we said or did, and we'll make sure that we get back to you over the course of the week. Also helps our algorithm. So if you like this show, helps our YouTube algorithm. And I say this week after week, the number one thing you can do if you do enjoy this show is to share. You got a cousin who's a huge Bills fan, text them. You got a friend who's a huge Bills fan, text them. You got family members, coworkers, they're big fans. Shoot them a text. Let them know about the Air Raid Hour. They can join us every Monday night here as we just continue to love our Buffalo Bills, support our Buffalo Bills, and talk Buffalo Bills football and sort of get that passion out on a weekly basis. And of course, if you're listening on all audio platforms, we appreciate you as well, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Sometimes I'm just straight baffled by how many people not only watch us, but listen to us as well. It's pretty crazy. Almost as many people listen to us as they do watch us on a weekly basis. So thank you for all the people who are listening in podcast form. If you ever get to the hour 30 mark, something tells me you might check out at 45, but we always do appreciate it. And we appreciate your boy, even though it looks like he missed most of the show. He comes in and says, "Go Hills." So no, we know it's me. Keep it autocorrect. And that's how we end every show, and we will end this show the same. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Bills country. Let's ride.
Are we having fun yet?